Bishut Kvoda Rabbanim, Lauren and Dan Binstock, thank you for these wonderful presentations. On behalf of all of us, I'm sure you'll join Elaine and myself in sending our prayers and our best wishes to Chief Rabbi Mervis for the speedy recovery of his father, and Refuah Karova Lavo. May Hashem send a speedy healing to him and good news to the Mervis family. Let me congratulate, first of all, Matthew Miller of Koren and Magid, who has achieved this extraordinary publication in only 7 years of the Noé Edition of the Talmud Bavli, and has transformed the face of Jewish publishing. This is really an extraordinary achievement, Matthew, and please send congratulations to the entire incredible team that you've assembled. And you really have done great things. I want to say to Harav Meni Evan Yisrael how humbled we are by the extraordinary achievement of his father Harav Adin Steinsaltz and the great way that he himself is continuing this work. The Steinsaltz Gemara is one of the real spiritual masterworks of our age and indeed of any age, and we are privileged to have lived in the time of Rav Steinsaltz, and please commend to him our deep indebtedness. Thirdly, of course, it's wonderful to be here. We thank the Kinlos community for hosting this, to Rabbi Lawrence, Rabbi Leitner, President of the United Synagogue, Michael Goldstein, and thank you for all you do for the community. Nachron Chaviv, to Leo and Susan Noé. Friends, we had the privilege, Elaine and myself, of being with Leo and Susan on Chol HaMoed Sukkot for the opening of an extraordinary institution they've created in Bnei Brak, a vast educational center for the organization Aleh, which deals with badly brain-damaged children, and where Susan dedicated a Sefer Torah in the memory of her late parents. And what you have done there, it brought tears to our eyes. Oh, you can't hear. You don't know how lucky you are. That event, seeing what you have created in Aleh and Bnei Brak, was just extraordinary. It was an act of chesed, the like of which, we just humbled by. And now to join that to this incredible project, the whole Noé edition of the Koren Talmud Bavli. It's philanthropy, tzedakah, chesed, on a truly epic scale. The Gemara in Kedushin ends with this debate, which is greater, Talmud or Maaseh, is learning or doing greater? And of course, Rabbi Akiva resolves the whole issue by saying, Gadol ha-Talmud she-ha-Talmud mevi lidei Maaseh. Greater is Talmud because Talmud leads to doing. You have embodied that principle. You have valued learning and you have learned, but you have shown how learning leads to doing and what Torat Chesed, the law of loving kindness, actually looks like in real life. You are embodiments of that value. And therefore I say to you, Leo and Susan, you are a Kiddush Hashem, and we salute you and we thank you. Friends, one of the things that I've been involved with Matthew Miller and Koren has emerged from what Elaine and I discovered as we have traveled the Jewish world these past few years. And we have discovered that the deepest spiritual challenge facing Jews today is tefillah, is prayer. Wherever we go, people say, how do we get more inspired by prayer? And one of the reasons that prayer is difficult is people don't understand the tefillot. They don't understand the prayers. That's why we did the machzorim and the commentaries. But another reason is that people don't understand what prayer is as such. What are we doing when we pray? And I want in the next 15 minutes to take a little journey with you, showing how one little sentence in the Gemara that is actually about something else completely can transform our understanding of what it is when we daven. And let's begin with the statement itself, and it's on the bottom of the page. Can you see on page 18? It's an amazing statement. Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabban Shimon bar Yochai, afilu lo kara adam ela kriyat shema shachrit va'arvit. If you do nothing but say Kriya Shema every morning and every night, Kiem lo yamush, you have fulfilled the line that says, Lo yamush sefer Torah zemi picha v'agita bo yomam v'layla, let this sefer Torah not depart from your mouth, and you shall meditate in it day and night. And we assume that means 24 hours a day or 16 hours a day. And Rabbi Yochanan and Shimon bar Yochai, these are not nobodies. Rabbi Yochanan was the putative author of the Talmud Yerushalmi, and Shimon bar Yochai was the greatest mystic of the whole Tannaitic, of the whole rabbinic era. These are major statements, major heroes of the Spirit. And yet they say, if you only said Kriya Shema morning and night, you fulfill the thing, don't stop learning. But they add a little proviso. They say, but don't tell an Am Haaretz that, or they'll never learn. They'll just say Kriya Shema morning and evening. So don't tell them. And along comes Lauren's favorite, Rava, and says V'Rava Amar, but Rava says mitzvah la'amro b'fnei Am Haaretz. It's a mitzvah to tell an Am Haaretz that. Why? Because Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, both of whom are absolute perfectionists when it comes to Torah, they believe that you really should spend 16 hours a day learning Torah, nothing else. But Rava, who, as we've seen, as Lauren showed us, have a developmental approach to education, wants to raise somebody's self-esteem. Don't write yourself off. If you do nothing more than Kriya Shema morning and evening, you have still fulfilled that mitzvah, and then you've got them on board, you've given them self-esteem, and Rava relies on the dynamics of the teaching process that they will grow. Okay? That is an interesting thing. Shimon bar Yochai is a bit of a Litvak in this, and Rava is a bit of a Chabadnik. Combine the two, you can't go wrong, I promise you. But there it is. That's the statement. That's Gemara Menachos. Now, I am not going to take that statement any further. I am just going to ask you one very simple question, which is what, according to this Gemara, are we doing when we say Kriya Shema? Are you with me? Because according to this Gemara, what we are not doing is davening. We're not being mitpalel. What we are doing is Talmud Torah. We're learning Torah. That's exactly what they say. All you have to do is say Kriya Shema morning and evening, and you fulfill the mitzvah of learning Torah morning and night. They hold that Kriya Shema isn't prayer at all. It's a mitzvah of Talmud Torah, right? It's a mitzvah of learning Torah. That's what Kriya Shema is. And I want us to stay with that because we will find that an absolutely revolutionary proposition. Now, let me ask you the question. The question is simple. For the whole of the biblical era, at least most of the biblical era, what was Avodat Hashem? What was it to serve God? The answer was Avodat Hashem took place in the temple. It was officiated over by priests, and it took the form of sacrifices. That's what it was. It was central to Judaism. What happened with Chorban Habayit? What happened, especially with the destruction of the second temple? What was going to replace Jerusalem, the temple, the priesthood, and the sacrifices? We know that the sages came up with a number of theories on this, a number of them, but two in particular. And you will find the two here on the next page, on page 19. Can you see? Page 19. Itmar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina Amar Tfilas Avos Tiknum Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Amar Tfilas Keneged Tamidim Tiknum. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, who lived in Lud in the 3rd century, was the head of the town, tells us that the substitute for sacrifices was prayer. Shachrit replaced the Tamid Shel Boker, the morning sacrifice. Mincha replaced the Tamid Shel Ben Habayim, the afternoon sacrifice. Mariv was Hekter Chalavim Ve'avarim, and Musaf was the special sacrifice offered on Shabbos and holy days. So prayer sacrifices were substituted for by prayer. However, that was only one line of thought. Let's have a look in source 3 in Menachos, Amar Reish Lakish, who was, of course, the learning partner of Rabbi Yochanan, a Baal Tshuva. This is the Torah for a burnt offering, a meal offering, a sin offering, and a guilt offering. He dissects that in two and says, Zot Torah, that's the Torah, and that is the equivalent of all those different offerings. From which he concludes, Ki'ilu hikriv ola, kol ha'osek b'Torah, ki'ilu hikriv ola mincha chatos v'asham. Whoever learns Torah is as if he brought those sacrifices. Have a look in source 4, Omer Rabbi Shmuel ba'anem Rav, Gadol Talmud Torah, Yosemi kravas tamidim. Learning Torah is even greater than offering sacrifices. Now we have here two different routes. Point 2, we have here two different roads opened up by the sages. When the temple was destroyed, what replaced sacrifices as a way of serving God? Route 1 was tefillah, prayer. Route 2 was Talmud Torah, learning. And we see both of those represented in the Gemara, and of course they had different homes. Prayer belonged to the Beit Knesset, and learning belonged to the Beit Midrash. So these two activities were different activities, one of the heart, one of the head. They had different homes, and those were the two roads opened up. And they're different worlds, they're different phenomenologies. Now, point 3, tell me, what is the difference between prayer and study? In prayer, we speak to God, right? Chanenu mincha deva beinu v'haskel. Rafa'enu Hashem v'nereva. Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Please give us knowledge, forgive us, heal us. We are talking to God. In prayer, we are talking to God. In study, what is happening? God is talking to us. We're listening and we're reading the Torah, God's word through Moshe Rabbeinu, or one of the commentaries. Halachic commentary, Agadic commentary, doesn't matter. In prayer, we are talking to God. In study, God is talking to us. Or to put it the other way around, in prayer is an act of speaking, study is an act of listening. That is the difference between those two, and that is point 3. Point 4, let us have a look at something that happens in the Siddur. Can you see this right at the beginning? What do they call it now, the late arrivals in Shul? JFK, just for Kiddush, I think it's called. So if you're just for Kiddush, you would have missed this bit because it's right at the very beginning. But you see, right at the beginning, before we do the Birkot HaShachar, before we do the dawn blessings, we make brachas over the Torah, and then what do we do? You remember what Lauren told us just now. Chayav adam lashlish limudo. A person has to divide his learning, or her learning, sorry, Lauren, into 3, Mikra, Mishnah, and Gemara. That is a universally accepted principle. How that works out in practice, you've already indicated. The Balei Tosafot say one way and so on. But the truth is, it is universally agreed that you have to divide your learning into 3, Mikra, Torah, Bible, etc., Mishnah, and Gemara. Now have a look at that page. Can you see it on page, the source 5 on page 20? Yeah? That's what we say immediately after the blessings of the Torah. Can you see what's happening in that passage? And a precise 3-stage learning. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, the priestly blessings from Parshas Naso. Then Elo Devarim She'en Lahem Shiur, these are the things that have no fixed measure. That's a Mishnah Peah, chapter 1, paragraph 1. And then, Elu Devarim She'adam Ochel Perasem Be'olam Hazeh. That's a Gemara from Shabbos Stuff, page 127a. So you can see, we begin, before we even open our mouths in prayer, we begin with an active study precisely structured on the principle of dividing your time into three. Then we say the Birkot HaShachar and the various other prayers. And then, what happens next? Have you got it? Number 6? This is just before Mizmor Shir Chanukah Sabais LeDavid, right? I don't know what page it is on the Siddur. Can you see what it says? Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, that is the Tamid Shel Boker, that is the passage of the morning sacrifice. Then Ezehu Mukomon Shel Zvachim, which is a chapter of Mishnah. It's the Mishnah in Zvachim chapter 5. So we have the first paragraph is Mikra from Numbers chapter 28. It's Parshas Pinchas. Then Mishnah, and then we have Rabbi Yishmael Omer B'Shlosh Esrei Midos HaTorah Nidroshes. And here we have to understand, where is that from? Anyone know? That's from a halachic midrash on the book of Vayikra known as the Sifra, the Torah Kohanim. But you have to have a look. Have you got it there on page source 7? Yeah? Do you have this? Maimonides' Law of Torah Study? Where he brings this law, Chayav l'shalesh et zman l'midato, shlish b'torah shebichtav, shlish b'torah shebal peh, shlish yavin v'yaskil acharit davra, right? Right? And then have a look. In the middle of that second line, v'yavin b'midot shehatorah nidreshet bahem. You should understand the exegetical principles by which the Torah is expounded. Ad sheyeda heich hu ikar midot ve'eich yotzi ha'asur v'hamutar yotze bahem me'advarim shelama mpi hashmuah. Ve'inyan zeh, learning those exegetical principles is called hu hanikra Gemara. We nowadays only use the word Gemara to refer to the Talmud. But Maimonides tells us explicitly that any methodological study from that age is called Gemara. So we see that the beginning of Birkot HaShachar begins with a study session. Mikra, Mishnah, Gemara. The end of Birkot HaShachar end with a second study session structured on exactly those lines of Mikra, Mishnah, Gemara. Here we have a slight difference between Anglo Jewry and Eastern European Jewry as to how many korbanos you say. Have you had a look in the Green Siddur on the one hand, and if you have a look on the East European Siddurim, we have Matthew and I agree to differ on this one, because the Koren Siddur is an East European Siddur, and you will see there are lots and lots and lots of korbanos. It's terrific. The only trouble is, it's wrong. I mean, forgive me. He's going to sacrifice the sacrifices. The reason I say it's wrong is I had the great zechut to have a great-grandfather who published the first printed edition of the first ever Siddur, which was the Siddur of Amram, produced in the 9th century. And you will see the Siddur of Amram and the Siddur of Sadia Gaon in the 10th century have it exactly as Minhag Anglia has it. When very, very simple Mikra, Mishnah, Gemara. Okay? So that's the beginning. So now we are seeing something we didn't fully understand before, that we are learning even before we're praying, and we're learning after we're praying, and that all happens within the first few minutes of Shachrit. What about the end of Shachrit? Now here, the trouble is that we can't see the full building, because the building as it existed doesn't exist anymore. What we have at the end of davening on a weekday Shachrit is, first of all, Ashrei. Then we have a psalm, Lamnatseach. And then we have Uvolet Zion. And then we have something, the Kedusha. It's called the Kedusha de Sidra. We say Kadosh, 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 and Baruch Kavod Hashem Imkomo. but we say them with their Aramaic translations as well. And then we have a series of prayers culminating in a kind of concluding prayer, Yehi ratzon milfonecha, etc., etc., Shenishmo chukecha be'olam hazeh, etc., etc. It's unclear what that whole sequence is until we go back and discover what it was. Now, I'm not going to read the source to you. You see it in source 8. The source 8 tells you exactly what actually happened. It is from the Tshuvas Rav Natronai Gaon, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Sura in Babylon in the 9th century. And he explains something very fascinating, that it was the absolute fixed custom that every single day at the end of davening, they learnt 10 verses of Nevi'im, of prophets. It's like a biblical Daf Yomi, or like 929, you know. They learned Nevi'im. And then they went through it, and then after learning Nevi'im, he says they would either learn Mishnah or Gemara. Now, that whole custom has disappeared. We don't learn, I don't know any communities that learn those 10 verses of Nevi'im every single day. All that are left are these verses. Uvalet Zion Goel, 2 verses on redemption from Isaiah chapter 59, and the 2 verses of Kedusha from Isaiah 6 and from Yechezkel, the 2 mystical visions in the prophetic books. But you will see that they were originally learned. They weren't just said, they were learned. And that is why the Targum is there. It doesn't appear anywhere else. Whenever else we say Kedusha, we're kind of praying it, or we're referring to it. We're not actually learning it. And because at that point in Kedusha Desedra, at the end of davening, they actually learnt it, we retain the Targum, because that's how they learnt something. They learnt it with its translation. So now we know the following, that just as every davening begins with 2 different sessions of learning, so every session of davening ended with a session of learning, which included Nevi'im, and included exactly on Rava's principle that Ein Adam Lomed Elo B'Makom Mimakom Shelu Bo Chavetz. If a person preferred Mishnah, they learned Mishnah, and if they preferred Gemara, they did Gemara. That's according to Rav Natronai. So there was serious learning right at the beginning and the end of davening. The real question I am now going to ask, point number 6, is what is the Kriyat Shema doing in the middle of davening? What exactly is it doing? What? And I'll tell you exactly. Shema is there not because it's a prayer. It isn't a prayer. In a prayer, we speak to God. Shema, when we say Shema Yisrael, are we speaking to God? God is speaking to us through Moshe Rabbeinu. Listen, O Israel. This is directed to us. It isn't directed to God. Shema, we are actually learning. And here's the proof, right? Can you see source 9 on page 22? Here's a Gemara in Brochus. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Hishkim lishnot, Achelo kara kriyat shema tzarech levarech. If you get up early to learn, and you haven't yet said Kriyat Shema, you have to make a bracha. The brachas over learning Torah. Mishikara Kriyat Shema eno tzarech levarech. But if you've already davened Shema in Shachris, you don't need to make a bracha. Shekva nifta ba'ahava rabbah. Because you have already said the bracha when you said Ahava Rabbah. Ahava Rabbah is the functional equivalent of a blessing over learning. The Gemara says so. It is a bracha al haTorah. And that exempts you from saying the brachas over learning if you have said Ahava Rabbah. So we now know what Shema is doing there, and why specifically it is there before the Amidah. It is there because first learn and then pray. That is what Chazal are telling us. But why? Surely They're two different things. Learning and praying are two different things. They're two different kinds of mitzvahs. They're two different kinds of mental activity. What has learning got to do with praying? And the answer is this. When we pray, we are speaking to God. But when we learn, we are listening to God. And this is the fundamental point. Before we can ask God to listen to us, we have to show that we can listen to him. And that is what Kriya Shema is doing. And now finally I come to point 7, my final point. We know that the Amidah is called the Shemona Esrei, which means 18. We also know if you count up the paragraphs, they come to 19. Which is the odd one out? Everyone says V'lamoshine. Everyone. Why? Because historically, it was the last of the paragraphs to be added. I don't have time to work out the analysis here. But if you actually look at those middle 13 brachot, one of them stands out, and it's not V'lamoshine. Every one of those brachot in the middle is a prayer for something, except one. Shema Kolenu. Shema Kolenu is the only paragraph that doesn't ask for anything in particular. It's a prayer about prayer. Shema Kolenu. It's, we've said lots of prayers, please listen to us. It's a meta prayer. So now you see the drama that is being set out in front of us. I think you can see it. If you can you just see it there on page 23? You see it? Second half of the page. Shachrit consists of two climaxes. One before the Amidah, the other during the Amidah. The one before the Amidah consists of the words Shema Yisrael. The one in the middle of the Amidah consists of the words Shema Kolenu. That is what the drama is about. We engage in an act of listening to God, Shema Yisrael, and then we say to God, we have listened to you, please listen to us, Shema Kolenu. And that is the incredible tension and the creative tension. And that is what makes Jewish prayer unusual, and that's what makes Judaism unusual. That is how Chazal took the two things that they saw as the substitute for the sacrifices, praying and learning, and somehow they brought them together. And so they brought together learning and prayer. So they brought together mind and heart. So they brought together the divine word and the human word. So they brought together listening to God and speaking to God. And the Siddur is not so much just about speaking, it's also about listening as well. And that is why we have to say Shema Yisrael to ourselves before we can say Shema Kolenu to God. I hope that gives you an insight into prayer that you didn't see before. And it is a very, let it mature, because it's a really profound idea that Chazal gave. And all I can say, Leo and Susan, is that I've tried to show that study can be a form of prayer. And prayer itself is a form of study. You have made study possible for hundreds of thousands of people who could not have done it otherwise. In that reward, may all your prayers be answered. Amen.